Welcome everybody who's sliding in. We'll give it a moment for everybody to get in and then we'll get started. All right, we still see people populating it, so we'll give it just another moment.
And this will be recorded and posted on our CNPS YouTube channel as well.
Well, welcome everybody. We're glad to have you here, and we're even more excited to have our speakers here. As Maya said, this is going to be recorded. It'll be available through our YouTube channel, and it will be sent out to you at a couple days after we're done with the chat, with the talk here. Feel free to use the Q&A for questions directly to us. We'll get to them as we can, and to use chat to introduce yourselves and to talk amongst yourselves. It's a great, really knowledgeable group usually attending these talks. These are part of our monthly Naturehood series that includes garden chats and a deeper dive 101. And so we see people still rolling in, but it is being recorded. It'll be available to you. We're glad to have you all here. Well, I'm Anne-Marie Benz. I'm the Horticulture Programs Manager from CNPS. We're joined by Jen Aguilar, who is also a CNPS and running our tech for this and helping with our education and communications teams. If you want to go ahead and take us to the first slide, Jen. So tonight we're going to have Maya Argaman, Billy Krimmel, and Genny Arnold. Maya graduated from UC Davis with a degree in environmental science and management, and that's where she fell in love with native plants, both in the natural and the built environments. Before she joined our team, she was a field technician for both the BLM and the Forest Service in New Mexico and the Sierra. Most recently, she had worked as a landscape designer in the Bay Area, and in her free time, she likes to surf, go on bike rides, and cooks with friends. Then we're going to go to Billy, who is coming to us from Miridae, and Genny from Theodore Payne Foundation. So we're going to start with Maya.
Thanks for that introduction. I was not expecting that at all. Great. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm really excited for all the panelists, and this topic is really fun. I see wildflowers as a great gateway into native plants and gardening in general, because it's generally pretty low stakes and really accessible and cheap also. Like, it's way cheaper to buy a native seed packet than a 1 gallon plant that you're going to kill later. That's just how I see it. And it's fun to experiment with wildflowers as well. So I'm going to talk about just the general tips and tricks and methods with sowing wildflower seeds. And yeah, this was a picture I took in Santa Cruz, and there are some annuals in there as well in that photo. And so when I talk about annuals, most wildflowers in California are in that range, which means that they complete their entire life cycle or the growing cycle in 1 year. So generally, when you are sowing wildflowers, you want to mimic that natural cycle of annuals, which generally goes for in the summer, the seeds ripen, and then in the fall, they germinate with the early rains. And then in the winter, they grow their basal leaves and roots. And then in the spring, wildflowers reach their full bloom, their peak bloom. And then in the summer, the cycle repeats again and their seeds ripen in fall. So that's the general life cycle of annual wildflowers. And that being said, when you're growing them, you want to wait to deadhead the flowers until they've dried up, and then they can produce viable seeds for the following year, or you just let them reseed and complete their cycle on their own. And also it's great to leave seeds for the birds and other wildlife as well. So the three basic requirements for seeds to be successful are Minimal competition from weeds. That's a really critical, important step when you're preparing your site for sowing wildflowers. And a tip that I like to do is called, I don't know if this is an official term, but weed flushing, where you prepare your bed or your area that you're sowing your seeds, and then you water it and then wait a few weeks for the weeds to sprout up, and then you remove the weeds. And if it's really weedy, repeat that cycle again and again. So that kind of minimizes the competition from the weeds that come up. And seeds require consistent moisture. So in order for them to germinate, they really need water. So water weekly, and to keep the soil consistently wet, but not too wet, doesn't need to be waterlogged, but wet enough. And that also helps from, so birds don't come and eat the seeds as well. I find that keeping it wet kind of helps deter that. And another really critical aspect of seeds for germination is good seed to soil contact. And so they really only need a small amount of cover, but they really need that contact with the soil. And what I like to do is, once I've done my weeding and I've scattered my seeds, I like to walk over the seeds with cardboard in order to make sure that the seed is really in good contact with the soil. And there are other methods to do that. You can get like, I mean, I've done cardboard, but I think there's other, like you can use a piece of plywood or a sod roller. You can get really fancy with it, but just making sure that there's good contact with this seed to soil is critical as well. Next slide, please. Okay, and these are some more tips that I have. It's fun, really fun to experiment. Like I said, it's really low stakes with seeds because you just scatter and just see what happens. So you can kind of play around with it. You can have like one zone in your garden where you scatter and rake it, or you can have another zone where you just scatter it and lightly cover it with mulch or with no mulch. In my opinion, there's not like a right or wrong way to do it. It just really depends on what you're trying to grow and, the soil that you have. And so those are some tips as well. You can also start indoors. What I like to do with not just wildflower seeds, just edibles as well. You can use old egg cartons and, start indoors that way. And then you can transfer them outside after because they decompose in the soil as well. And also that's a good tip because then, inevitably some weeds will still come up. So which seedlings are weeds and which are actually the seedlings from, the seed packet that you purchased from. So that's also another good tip. And another method is using horticultural sand. You don't use like beach sand or anything like that because that's salty, and you need to use actual horticultural sand. And you can mix that with your seeds and then scatter it, which helps, for areas that have a lot of birds and pests, that helps. And it also assures like a more even spread of the seeds as well. And last but not least, buy seeds local to your area. It's important to, have grow plants that are, suited to thrive in your ecoregion and in your own area. Calscape is a great tool for that. You can filter by annuals. You can go to your local CNPS chapter, your local native plant nursery. These are all great resources, to find a locally sourced seed for your area. And this is a photo that I took in my area in the sunset in San Francisco. So it's tidy tips, Arroyo lupin, and baby blue eyes, and our California poppy. So this is just an example of what you can do with wildflower seeds. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Maya. I know we're having a couple of people who are having trouble with seeing, and I think that's not broadly spread. It may be internet issues, or you may want to try kind of rebooting or exiting and re-entering on that. Well, welcome, Billy. Billy is a plant insect ecologist turned landscaper. After completing his PhD at Davis, he started Miridae. It's a Sacramento-based architecture and construction company that aims to engage people with and create habitat for native plants and the wildlife they support. At the start of the pandemic, he launched Miridae Mobile Nursery. It's a modified box truck nursery. Imagine like if you had an ice cream truck that came around with plants. It is seriously the coolest little like mobile nursery around. So they started that at the beginning of the pandemic, right when everybody really needed plants. And then in 2021, he co-founded Miridae Living Labs, a nonprofit organization that uses their design build projects as opportunities for research and for STEM education. So a bunch of cool things in the hopper. Thanks for joining us, Billy.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll share my screen. Yeah, so thank you everyone for being here, and thanks CNPS for hosting this event. I'm really excited to talk about seed dispersed plants in general, and specifically the project, our Seedpile project that I'll be talking about today. And so, yeah, as Anne-Marie mentioned, we have some different kind of branches of our organization. They all start with the garden, and we're excited about using the garden as a tool to create habitat, to engage people with nature, and also to learn about what are the best practices that can inform our decisions as a landscape design build company. And so we've been in business for like 6.5 years now doing landscape architecture and construction. And with that side of the business, you know, we design and create these little patches of habitat within the urban matrix. And yeah, like Anne-Marie said, this year we started this nonprofit wing called Miridae Living Labs. And that came about because we had all of these like ways we wanted to use these built gardens to do research. And my background is in research, and like there are all these low-hanging fruits, it seemed like, and also a lot of kind of anecdotes that were guiding the industry. You know, there's a lot of good science behind like conservation biology and agriculture and a lot of like marine conservation biology. But the way that we look at, you know, creating native habitat, ecological landscaping tends to be a bit more anecdotal. And then we also saw these gardens as a good way to get, you know, kids engaged in STEM education outside of like a laboratory. So using these gardens as living laboratories, and then having the research from Living Labs inform what we do as a design build company. And then we have this, yeah, this mobile nursery, which is really fun. Just a good way to engage people in native plants. We're out there spreading the good word of native plants out to communities all over the Sacramento area. And most of our, basically people host us in their neighborhood. They spread the word to their neighbors, they invite them. And it's a way for us to, and we usually have designers and ecologists on the truck. And it's a way for us to just spread the word of native plants and kind of get them out to folks that otherwise might not be interested in them. But also we can provide access to a lot of native plants that otherwise are not really available in the Sacramento area to retail customers. But today I'm going to be really focusing in on what we're doing with Miridae Living Labs, which is a project that is also in conjunction with UC Davis and Haven Kears, who did a deep dive in this series a while back as a partner on this project as well. And a lot of the great graphics work is done by our design team at Miridae. And so, like I mentioned, Miridae Living Labs is a nonprofit, and our goal is to use native landscapes as living laboratories for STEM education and for research. But we also really want to use it to address important gaps in knowledge within the landscaping industry in order to advance best practices. And one of the ones that I've kind of always been obsessed with, and I love grassland species, I love seed dispersed plants, the forbs and the wildflowers are what I get excited about. And that's like what I did my research on and what I continue to do research on. I mean, I'm a tarweed fanatic as well as a lot of other kind of forbs that are underappreciated. And a lot of these plants are really underrepresented in gardens and design spaces. And they're simultaneously like super important habitat wise. But the problem is that, you know, they look kind of weedy. Annuals come and go and they leave their corpse behind. And this is something that's fine for a lot of people that are really like knowledgeable and already kind of there on native landscaping. But, you know, we're a company that tries to reach people pretty broadly. And a lot of these things are roadblocks to them. You know, even a milkweed that's infested by oleander aphids can be a problem for kind of an average customer that wants a very intentional looking garden. And so we've been for a long time thinking like, how do we get these seed dispersed plants, annuals, biennials, these ones that maybe look weedy into the, you know, the urban matrix. And some of these plants, you know, you see them on the roadside, like sunflower, tarweed, turkey mullein, fiddleneck, primrose. And so it seems like there are some places where they can thrive. And, you know, as Maya mentioned, native seeds have a hard time with competition. So like competition-free space is important. And a lot of like harsh conditions, like the side of a road can be great for that. And, you know, for turkey mullein that goes through a dove's crop to germinate, it needs to be scarified. You know, maybe getting run over by a car is a good thing. So the idea is like, how can we think of like the urban matrix as an opportunity for a lot of these species that might otherwise be difficult to establish in a garden? And then how can we take advantage of these migration corridors for humans, like roads, bike paths, sidewalks, railroads, and leverage them to facilitate native seed dispersal? And so the goal is like, you know, can we tell a homeowner what seeds to plant in their front yard that are likely to go disperse out into the neighborhood? And can we tell Caltrans what seeds to put on the side of the highway that are going to survive and disperse down the highway? And so that's the kind of like reasoning behind the Seedpile project. And it's a project that Haven and I piloted 2 years ago, where we just drove around and dropped piles of seeds all over the place and then monitored them to see what survived. And this last fall and now and going into the summer, we're in our kind of second pilot phase where we're turning this into a citizen science, community science project, where people can get a packet of these seeds, scan a little QR code, and get instructions on what to do with them. And basically the idea is you take your free packet of seeds with about 10 native species, dump them on the ground somewhere, and see what happens. And we're trying to keep it super simple. You know, we don't want people to be weeding the stuff around it. The idea is what seeds, what species can thrive in realistic urban settings, and hopefully be able to actually get to a larger size in the summertime. This is tarweed on an asphalt road in Davis. And then eventually even, you know, create flowers and drop their own seeds. And we have seen some plants coming up this year that are from the seed piles that Haven and I scattered 2 years ago, meaning that those little piles of seed turned into plants that dropped seed, that germinated and created another generation, which is ultimately what we're trying to accomplish here. And so, you know, we've been promoting this. We have about 1,000 participants right now that are taking part in the project. They can pick up the little free packet of seeds. We got, I think, 65 pounds and 2,000 packets. I think we've distributed about 1,800 packets. And people sign up for it. They plop the seeds down somewhere, and then they start entering data, which I'll go into the data form in a little bit, and just help us understand which of these species will do well. And we intentionally use species that are relatively easy to identify and that aren't going to be, you know, problematic in various ways. Like we took out sunflower because sunflower seed farmers didn't want us co-pollinating with them, cross-pollinating. But it's been fun. We've asked people to upload pictures too. So we have all these fun pictures of these seed piles everywhere. And we encourage people to put them in these kind of like underappreciated spaces for habitat. There's all these, you know, tree wells, roadsides, health strips, you know, places like that, little bare patch of dirt. But importantly, don't put them in your arboretum. Don't put them in the national park. And we're piloting all of this in the Sacramento area. And that's made it a lot simpler because we have all the seeds are from known ecotype from Hedgerow Farms, and they're all from like a 30-mile radius of the area where participants are located. And so that simplified things a lot. And it's been fun. We have a lot of people from all ages are participating. It gets you out into the city. It's like having a little pet kind of. We have a lot of, there's like various classes that are doing this as class projects. This is a scout troop, a lot of kids. This is Jane, one of our landscape designers who did pretty much all the graphics for this project and has been super involved. And yeah, just a lot of these kind of unexpected places for habitat. And so these are pictures now from the seeds that were sown this fall, popping up, you know, kind of nowish. You see some lupins and some poppies, phacelia coming up here. And it's fun to identify these things. And I think one of the goals of this project, in addition to the research side, it's just like getting people to kind of have a new set of eyes as they walk around and they see sprouts coming up. And oh, this could be a beneficial habitat plant, or this could be a maybe a weed, and how do we identify these different sprouts? And then also, like, worst case scenario, we learn nothing, but we've put 65 pounds of locally sourced native seed out into our environment. And here we have some more. It's really it's got some fill next here, a couple species of lupin. We have arroyo and the dense flowering and some poppy here. And we're trying to keep it super simple for people, you know, trying to get them to not be overwhelmed. And it's okay if you can identify some stuff at a certain point. It gets easier as the plants get bigger. We do have these little identification resources for people to help them identify them. And one of the things that we're hoping to learn from this process is, like, do we use too many species, or there's some that were simpler to identify than others? And we're trying to get a bunch of information on, you know, how are these spaces managed? Are there leaf blowers? Is there herbicide? And some of these things might actually be good for some species. It's kind of the part that we're interested in learning about. And so we have these data forms, and we're learning a lot about managing data forms and managing data and kind of how much details to ask for. So I'm glad that we kept it at a relatively manageable scale this year. But we are hoping to scale this up. We're hoping to go statewide, either next, or at least Bay Area and Southern California, either next year or the year after. And we need help on this. This is self-funded. Haven and I split the tab for the seeds, and then Miridae has been footing the bill for the, you know, the graphics and the data, or the kind of all the data input and all that stuff, and answering questions. So if any of you guys are interested in being a part of this project, we are looking for volunteers to, you know, respond to emails, help with data sorting, things like that. We are very much looking for funding to be able to scale this up next year. And so if you're interested and want to learn more, check out miridaelivinglabs.org, or you can email us at info@miridaelivinglabs.org. And if you're interested in learning more about the mobile nursery or our design build business, check out miridae.com. And with that, I will pass the baton. Thank you very much.
Well, you have a lot of people looking to join and to start or expand. A couple of them want to come work for you. So you are recruiting well. If you look through the comments throughout the state, there are people interested. And it's something we should always talk about more too. So
Fantastic.
you're going to get a lot of feedback on these parts. We're excited to have you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, next we have Genny Arnold. Genny Arnold is with Theodore Payne Foundation, another one of our favorite partners. She's their seed program manager and has worked with California native plants and seeds for 20 years. The seed program supports Theodore Payne Foundation's local source initiative and is a partner in the California Plant Rescue and Seed LA collaborations. Genevieve is dedicated to the preservation and understanding of local and regional natural spaces, urban restoration, and to benefit all communities, conservation and seed banking, and the creation of resilient integrated garden spaces that support healthy ecosystems and create connectivity and joy. Hiking to observe and photograph native plants and ephemeral flowers and the wildlife that depend on them is one of her favorite pastimes. So welcome, Genny.
Thank you so much. Billy, that was really wonderful. I'm happy to be following you. And I just want to say thanks to CNPS for inviting me to be part of tonight's Naturehood conversation. And I'm speaking to you here tonight from the Theodore Payne Foundation at the base of the Verdugo Mountains, just north of Los Angeles. And I'd like to take a moment for this acknowledgement written in collaboration with the Fernandino Tataviam Tribal Office.
I don't think we're seeing your slides.
Oh,
Jenny.
I'm sorry. Okay, one moment here. Let me try to share my screen again.
You know, we gave this a shot right before we went live and it all worked
I'm
then.
having some problems here. Okay, share screen. All righty, this should do the trick. How's that?
Oh, there we go. Great, thank you.
My apology. Sorry, everybody. We'll try that one more time. So again, coming to you from the base of the Verdugo Mountains, pictured here just north of Los Angeles from the Theodore Payne Foundation. And do just want to take a minute for this acknowledgement written in collaboration with the Fernandino Tataviam Tribal Administration. So California's ephemeral flowers, I thought Maya did a really wonderful job explaining what an annual wildflower is, so I won't take a lot of time with that. And ephemeral is just another word for annual, again, meaning that it lives its full life cycle in a year. So the flowers that come up each year were dropped from the parent plant the previous year and are considered like the next generation or the progeny seed. And sometimes the seed that you sowed the year before will not come up the very next year, but 2 years from then you might get a surprise. So just as in nature, in your garden, sometimes the seeds will sit under the soil in the soil seed bank until they get their germination cue. Ephemeral flowers native to California fulfill a variety of both practical and aesthetic purposes in the garden, one being trouble spots and disturbed soils. And I think a lot of the things I'm going to touch on tie in with both presentations. And so I'm very excited to connect with you both, Maya and Billy, about some of these topics. California ephemeral flowers are known for repairing the soil. They improve water penetration by breaking up the soil with their fast-growing roots, nutrient accumulation, they fix nitrogen, they can suppress weed, and of course, they are pollinator powerhouses. In fact, many farms throughout the state are incorporating them into their hedgerows, not only to cultivate their soil, but to support their crops. And here you have 3 native California seedlings hard at work repairing some disturbed soil, the arroyo lupin here, and you have the cotyledon or seed leaf, the first portion to emerge from the soil, and it provides nutritive support for the developing seedling. And then the true leaves come next. So then you have the cotyledons of the California poppy and true leaves, and the cotyledons and true leaves of Lacey phacelia. Retaining walls between paver stones, under the bird bath, by the hose bib. Wildflowers are great and for a variety of these purposes. And in this case, I've sown them here on a retaining wall. So not only do they help with erosion control and soil retention, they're providing beautiful greenery this time of year and will develop into, of course, wildflowers in the spring. And these are Pneumophila. I'll show you more pictures of those. And here are the cotyledons of those. Preparing the ground for planting perennials, not only in the context of repairing and fixing the soil, but also preparing to plant perennials. And I wanted to tell you a story tonight entitled From Dump Site to Pollinator Paradise. This is an actual dump site here in LA, and the land manager, very innovative, creative, forward thinking, and a very good neighbor. So you can see that this dump site, 20 feet under the ground, has dump site material, has layers of soil brought in from external sources over the years, and abuts a well cared for neighborhood. And so so there were flooding issues, and of course there's sort of like an eyesore issue. And so this land manager wanted to beautify, wanted to control erosion, wanted to create habitat in the urban area. And so they came to us. And so the first year, the very first thing they did on this large property was we did a trial meadow sowing. They did install irrigation and had a water truck. And then that spring, you can see they had a beautiful meadow, and it was tidy tips and arroyo lupin. And I was very pleased because, of course, while they didn't totally outcompete the pre-existing weed seeds in that soil, they did hold their own, even with really exotic invasive grasses like the brome grass here. Now, this site has full-scale perennial native plantings, native gardens there, and they even have a pop-up nursery and cultivate and grow their own native plants. And it all started by preparing the ground with native wildflowers. This is an urban home. They've removed their lawn. And so during the transition period, during the planning period, when they were thinking about what they were going to put in, they went ahead and sowed native wildflowers for that year. So not only did this create an urban habitat and beautiful, beautiful yard, the neighbors were probably pretty happy with that too. And the wildflowers will work their way around the perennials with a little bit of management over time. So they will, over time, just kind of blend in with the perennials that are put in. Parkways, walkways, public spaces. Here you have two walkways that have really pretty, really beautiful native plantings that do change seasonally, but you can see, if you imagine these photos without the wildflowers, there's a static nature to these plantings. With the wildflowers, you have change, you have surprise, you have movement, texture, variation in height. And you have this human engagement component that Billy mentioned. So when people walk through these spaces, they're stopping, they're looking, they're with their children, with their friends, they're observing insects coming in. So this engagement level, getting people excited about native plants and what they do, is also a big part of it. I love this one. This is on a school grounds, and the person planted Theodore Payne Foundation low growth seed mix at the base of some trees on a clearly largely concrete school grounds. Yes, you can do ephemeral native flowers in containers, in urban spaces, outdoor window boxes, small spaces, and again, planted in combination with edibles to help support your veggie garden. They're pollinator powerhouses, and once you incorporate natives into your garden, you will see more insects and more birds coming. It's very overt. It's a very overt shift, and it's a joy to watch. Here we have that Pneumophila I mentioned that I sowed in the retaining wall. Excellent for containers. It has a clumping form, does well in part shade, and also really cool in rock gardens or along pathway borders, alternated with stones and boulders and so forth. I did cultivate Chia in a container on a sunny porch with well-drained cactus mix, and I was able to cultivate it up to seed and then harvest that seed for a food source from a large tub-like container. I sowed Chinese houses in a container. Another benefit of doing this is that if you're then planning to experiment by sowing in the ground, you can study what your native seedlings will look like, so that when you deal with weeding going forward, you'll be able to discern which is the native seedling and which is the weed that you want to take out. I'm pleased to share with you Theodore Payne Foundation's balcony mix, which was designed for balconies, fire escapes, things like that, so that you can create a micro meadow with staggered bloom throughout the spring that will bring pollinators to an urban habitat and create habitat connectivity in areas where habitat is disjunct and patchworked. And here you have red maids, one of my very favorites, bird's eye gilia, goldfields, and then again, the baby blue eyes. In my description of my presentation, I mentioned sowing with creativity and intentionality. And you may ask, well, what is intentional sowing? What does that mean? What do I mean by that? And here's what I mean. You know, California, people come here from all over the world to see our wildflowers. Here you have images of the Poppy Reserve up in Lancaster, and then Carrizo Plains. And, you know, we come to these places, we take photos and memories, we never take flowers and seeds, and we also never sow seeds because they don't need our help. They've been there for centuries, and they know how to adapt. They know how to grow with the environmental changes. And on our web store, where we sell seeds through the web for mail order and physically in some of our seed packets, I include this statement to please protect the delicate balance of our native ecosystems by not sowing seed in parks, nature reserves, and wilderness areas. It is very difficult as a human being who's empathetic to our earthly surroundings to see burn scars. And with the increased frequency of wildfire, we're seeing it a lot more. At the top, you have the Woolsey fire, some Woolsey fire images, 2018 here in Ventura County. And then below you have the 2017 Latuna fire right here in our canyon. And I would say that part of intentional sowing is not just thinking about where you're going to sow seed, but understanding where you're not going to sow seed and why you're making that decision. And so with these images, I encourage you not to sow in post-burn areas. And it's a very natural instinct to want to help the land, to want to repair the land, to want to control erosion, to want to contribute as a caring human. But I think that the very best way to help care for post-burn land is to leave it be. You have fire-following species whose seeds have been under that soil for a long time, and now they have the charite, they've had the heat, they're going to come back, and maybe it's been a long time since they've been there. In addition, we have perennial pioneer species such as deerweed that come back first after a fire and fix that soil and prepare the ground for the other species to come back afterwards. And also, a lot of these areas are being monitored and monitored by biologists, botanists, restoration ecologists, and land managers who are maybe not only managing restoration, but monitoring to see what does come back. And on the two sides of the bottom picture, you see the Phacelia grandiflora and the foothill poppy, and TPF had some funding to do some monitoring and seed banking and propagation studies on fire following ephemeral flowers in Latuna Canyon after the Latuna fire. And we did see a lot of these fire followers come back in great numbers. And it was good to know that it was all natural and that there was no human intervention bringing in farmed seed sources. So that's another way to sow intentionally, is to avoid those spaces. So it's not all about what not to do, of course, and this ties in a lot with what Billy was saying. And for all you there in the chat, including Billy, who likes some of the lesser known species, there's a nice tarweed for you, as well as some other lesser known ephemeral native wildflowers. We do have a very robust local source seed program, a local source seed and plant program here through TPF, where we partner with landowners and land managers to legally and ethically collect seed so that we can put it in our conservation seed bank, as well as grow plants to offer these plants to people in the region so that they can plant both perennial plants and trees and ephemeral wildflowers that are resilient and well adapted to local environments, and that also support long co-evolved pollinator relationships. So by planting a locally sourced wildflower, you're protecting local species biodiversity, and you're helping to bridge fragmented habitats. And some of these cooler ones, we've got pincushion, the thistle sage, tarweed, we have another pincushion, the blazing star, the hairy lupin, Clarkia species, whispering bells. So this is really exciting, and this image is just some of our seed regeneration beds where we can bulk up second generation seed that still holds that genetic diversity that the parent seeds held. And so how can you sow both creatively and freely and enjoy yourself and intentionally at the same time? Here are some questions that you can ask yourself when you move forward with that. So one, what is my surrounding ecology? Am I in a wildland urban interface, or am I in the middle of the city where it's great to put down the telegraph weed and some of those tar weeds? By the way, I love both of those as well. Telegraph weed is one of my personal favorites, but that's getting off topic. But anyway, you know, in urban spaces, maybe that's okay, or maybe it's okay to sow a farmed source tidy tip. But are you in a wildland area where there are pre-existing native species on that area? If so, it's a good idea to get to know what you have there. You can use CalFlora is a wonderful database. You can come to places like Theodore Payne where we'll help you out to figure out what you have. And maybe you don't want to bring in seeds of that same species because you're trying to preserve that naturally occurring little population of that plant that's on your property. And you're trying to help support the genetic biodiversity that's inherent in those pre-existing plants. And how will this sowing affect ecology around me in the long term? And in the end, the most important question, you know, what is the best option available to me? Gardening with native plants is fun. It is not supposed to be limiting or telling you what you should and shouldn't do. But I love to encourage gardening where you're engaging in what's around you. You're engaging in learning about California native plants and finding out the best option for you when you choose what seeds to sow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. The balcony ones and all those different seed pieces are such great options for people. You know, we're going to have a couple of questions come up on our slide deck here for the panel, but one of the ones we're getting the most is, can people still scatter wildflower seeds right now? Can we be putting out for wildflowers?
Yes.
Waiting for one of you.
Anyone else want to chime in?
My answer has been it's still raining. So.
Yeah, definitely. I know in the beginning I was maybe it sounded a little too strict on the timeline of when you should sow, but it's okay to sow seeds now. Yeah.
And we are in a unique situation in that we're trying to cover a very broad area, and we understand that not all seasons are applicable or named in the appropriate ways for every place. So it's trying to get a group understanding. Could you go to the first question, Jen? Fabulous. So this is the toughest one. Do you have a favorite? Or is this like choosing your favorite child? You love them all equally but differently?
Meadow elegans. It's just such a neat plant. Love the smell. Love that it's still pollinator habitat in the late summer. A lot of the solitary bees will like harvest the resins from it in the early morning. It supports all of these like different types of predatory bugs that eat the dead insects stuck on it. It's a really fun plant.
What about you, Jenny and Maya?
I really love the red maids, Calandrinia ciliata. Excuse me, the lights. And that one's in our balcony mix, and I love that one because it's just a low growing little one. It's a beautiful, beautiful kind of pinkish maroon flower. And it's got a long cultural history here in California. And also it's it's a really cool one to plant in containers with other pots or kind of tucked in among other things, because it likes to be, you know, kind of in between things and have a little bit of protection and just peeks out. But the red maids are one of my favorites.
Fabulous. Maya, anyone that you want to recommend?
Yeah, sorry, my internet is going in and out. I mean, I love lupin. I also love, because I live in San Francisco, sand verbenas. I think those are really special. And yeah, I mean, those are two of my favorites right now, I would have to say, but it changes. But oh, and calicortus too. Whew, yeah, forgot about those. Those are beautiful, incredible wildflowers as well.
So many great ones to choose from. Well, if we could go to the next slide. So a really important one. How do these contribute to the health of our overall gardens and landscapes?
I think one that is pollinator habitat. It's they help you, they help with habitat connectivity because they bring pollinators from other plant populations in natural areas and provide places for them to go. And so they're a great habitat connector, and I'm sure the other panelists have other things to add.
Yeah, I mean, echoing that, there's just such a good biodiversity of wildflowers that are just not represented well in design spaces. And I learned from the California Grasslands Association that it's like we've destroyed, I think, like 99% of these grassland habitats that are, you know, grasses and forbs, annual dominated forb species, and more than 90% of our rare or threatened animal species depend on those for survival. And if you think about all the specialist insects that need a specific plant to survive, and how many of those don't have a chance in an environment without that plant, and how many of those are wildflowers, it's super important that we support these.
Yeah, and just echoing what everyone else is saying, just I think grasslands in particular are often overlooked, but they're a huge carbon sink, and they're really vital habitat. And I definitely have a special spot for California coastal prairie plant communities, and I think they're really
I think we've lost
special.
you.
And obviously, you know, okay, the internet is just not, I don't know what I was saying. Yeah, just pollinator habitat. And I think it's a great way for people to get lured into the power of native plants because they're so charismatic and special to me. So, yep.
Well, many of our pollinators have co-evolved with specific plants and often rely on just a few of them. So it's an important thing to have these wildflowers coming up when and where we would be looking for them. All right.
And I know that even if I want my plants to reseed, that I'm still happy when there's a bunch of goldfinches that are eating like my tarweed seeds. And birds definitely love, you know, these wildflowers too, because of how many seeds they produce.
Yeah. Yeah. Both the frustration and the joy of having that. What considerations should we make as we choose what wildflowers to grow in our spaces? In these spaces.
I'm going to go ahead and chime in with one thing, and that is that when you make a choice about what you'd like to sow, it's good to look into how vigorous they are as a reseeder. For example, I'm going to use elegant Clarkia as an example, which is a beautiful spiking native wildflower. And it is known to be a very vigorous reseeder, particularly in cultivated spaces. Some people really want that. And other times people are like, well, you know, I'm looking for more of a balance of different kinds of wildflowers in my space. So what I'm getting at is Don't think that you have to sow a ton of seed in a small space. Start out slow, see how things go over time, let the natural balance of things take effect so that you, and maybe look into what kind of reseeding rate, reseeding vigor they have, so that you can kind of just analyze a little bit going in what to expect and how that fits in with your vision.
That's good advice.
One little tip that we use for this is kind of like larger scale, you know, half acre up situations, but to add some structure to it so that it's not just a bunch of plants that are growing together. You can do little mixes where you have, you know, 5 species. Maybe you have Goldfield that's going to pop up early spring, and then poppy that'll be a bit later spring, and then, you know, gum plant, kind of a summer bloom, and then, you know, primrose or tarweed or something for your fall bloom. And you have like 5 different groups of that kind of combination of different bloom periods. And then you can scatter those in swaths. And so you get these like little like ephemeral monocultures that pop up and they kind of change color. But it's a neat way to add some structure while still having a bunch of species. That's not really relevant at the backyard scale, but if you have some space and you want to do sort of like a half acre scale meadow, it's pretty beautiful that way.
That would be a beautiful thing to have. All right, next question. Do you document what pollinators visit your wildflowers? The wildflowers that are in your yard.
I try. It's tricky. I mean, I think a tip for native bees is like first thing in the morning, you know, and right time of year to really capture that diversity. And that's, you know, a lot, or I don't know about most, but a lot of I think most of these like little solitary like mega chilids and things like that are really foraging in the early morning. And then keeping an eye on like things like salvias. A lot of them will forage on the oils and resins. Then they use that for mixing it with soil to make their little ground nests. And sometimes you can catch them not on the flowers, but on the other parts of the plant as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge iNaturalist geek when it comes to those pieces. So I'm not sure I'm documenting them, but I'm trying to learn them and save them. All right, let's go then to, do you want to talk about it, Jenny?
Oh, just that's really, really interesting information there, Billy. And I would say for me, you know, I know a little bit less of specifics about insects, but I carry my phone camera with me frequently, and I document in that way. So that's just.
Yeah. Our cameras have become great, useful tools. So what is your favorite resource for learning? What would you recommend, particularly to some of the beginning gardeners here?
I would recommend Cowscape is a great option. You can filter in the advanced search option to annuals, so then that's mostly wildflowers as well.
Cowscape is a great one. My favorite to recommend isn't a book or a website. It's your local nursery. It's really getting to know the people at your closest local good nursery and developing a relationship. Go, you know, if you're your Theodore Payne Foundation or one of them.
And your local CNPS chapter. I know the San Diego chapter has a great seeds and bulbs section. So that's only for San Diego, but they're a great resource as well.
Yeah, Cowscape's amazing. If you really want to like, another fun one is the Consortium of California Herbaria, which I think Cowscape taps into, but it's like where people have observed in the wild different populations. And so if you want to go find wild populations of these things and actually see them, and it's, you know, notes from, it could be 100 years ago from some botanist and how many they saw and where, and now some of these are private property and you can't get to them, but that's a tool I use a lot in my research for finding different populations of tarweeds. And then I would also say the California Native Grasslands Association is fantastic and really heavy on the grasslands wildflowers. They also have like workshops and things like that talk about some of these. So if you're not aware of that and you're into CNPS, that's a good place to look too.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. Those are all great resources that I also use. And I'll chime in with Theodore Payne Foundation. We have a native plant database on our home website that you can search by common name as well as botanical name. In addition to our online store, we have a filter function on there where you can search colors, features, annual, perennial. And so that's a really good learning resource. And our classes as well. I'm teaching classes, and we also have kind of like guided outings locally here in the LA area with botanists leading them. So yeah, feel free to reach out to us personally as well, like Anne-Marie was mentioning. And I'm a big cal flora fan as well. And for those of you who aren't aware of that, that's where you can go in and search different areas of California, and it shows you observations of species of plants that have been noted to grow there.
That's great. Yeah, there are some terrific classes too online at Theodore Payne's site, online and in person. So if you're close, terrific. And even if you're not, there's some great opportunities. And they're always developing new things. So if we could go to the next one. If you were going to grow your own Instagram background cutting garden, what would you grow?
For a cutting garden. I mean, that picture in my slide, I just love the combination of the baby blue eyes and the tidy tips and the lupin and the poppies. I think just having a wide variety of color to make everything pop is, you know, really nice. And Clarkias too are great. Yeah, for an Instagram background, that's what I would do.
I love everlastings, and they they're formed nicely. And then I also love salvia for the fragrance of it.
Yeah, the chia is great because it when it dries, it holds its shape, its spired shape. And echoing Maya's Clarkia suggestion, what's great about those for cutting gardens is they are known as farewell to spring, so they're late bloomers. So particularly on the showy Clarkia, you can cut a stem where the top part is blooming, and then it has other buds that haven't even opened yet on the same stem. So it's kind of like a long-lasting anchoring, thing for a vase. And another one of my favorites for a cutting garden is the showy penstemon, which is really spectacular in a large vase.
Oh yeah, and also yarrow I think is really incredible, resilient, and they reseed really vigorously as well. That would be great for a cutting garden. Yeah, salvias again for the fragrance. I love eriogonums too, buckwheats, like their pom-pom, like I think they're also really charismatic. I mean, it's not, I don't know if it's really technically a wildflower, but definitely not, but they're fun for cutting bouquets as well. And grasses too. I feel like, Billy kind of talked about grasses as well. I feel like they're often overlooked in gardens or in conservation, but I think you can have a lot of fun and play with grasses as well. I have a lot of stipa growing, and Muhlenbergia I feel like would be fun in a bouquet as well. Yeah, like a lot of fun play with different textures as well. So it doesn't have to just be a typical colorful bouquet.
Yeah, we have a lot of great options to choose from. All right, next slide. Okay, well, we're coming to the end. I know we haven't gotten to all the questions, and it's a little bit hard. There have been some terrific questions, and there's been even more terrific conversation, it looks like, in the chat. This has all been recorded. It will be sent out to you in a follow-up email along with some resources, including links to Miridae and to Theodore Payne Foundation. And we'll also have the recording available through CNPS's YouTube channel going forward. This is a series that we do, and next month is on pruning native plants, which is a whole broad topic in itself, and an important one. So we look forward to seeing you all next month. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to the question. We are trying to catch up on everything, and we're so excited to have you all here.
Yeah, thank you
all
so
very
much. Yeah, and feel free to
Right.
email us as well. We'll have a follow-up with our emails in there. So if you have specific questions as well. Yeah.
No. Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us. We're excited to support our bloom partners out in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Fun,
Happy
good talk.
Thursday, you all. Night.
Good night.